The Falcons inspired no one in their 15-9 win over the Raiders.
They became the embarrassment of the NFL.
Not only did the Raiders lose on Monday Night Football to the Atlanta Falcons, but the one thing that they couldn't do, they did.
Penn State quarterback Drew Allar announced that he is returning for his senior season in 2025.
I hope you're not tired of HBCUs hiring ex-NFL players as head coaches, because it seems like Michael Vick is next in line.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
No drama here, just a systematic dismantling of a division rival on prime time.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast.
Vikings win 30-12. There's absolutely no drama to it at all. The Vikings go up 10-0 in the first quarter, and the game would never, ever be even a one-score game again. The Vikings wouldn't trail for a single second of this one, and I think game script-wise and like feel-wise, vibes-wise, this game felt identical to the Vikings' Week 1 win over the Giants. Didn't it? It was like a similar score, right? Like it's a clearly overmatched quarterback, just not able to handle what's going on. There was a Dallas Turner sack. Like, just felt very much like that win over the Giants. And it's just like, okay, well, we didn't learn anything about anybody there, but I guess we take easy wins. And that's really what this one is. This is not a game of moments. This is not a game of, oh, well, here's this little specific spot. We got to discuss this and that little thing. Like we're so used to, especially on this show, the last 3 years of Locked On Vikings, like every game recap has been, well, they lost by 2, and here's all the different things that could have changed. Not this one. This one is just clearly a better team. But I do like this thing that I've been doing for most of these games where I like to try to come up with the true moment that encapsulates the game. I got a few things, I guess, but I think the one that comes to mind first is, so in the first half, the Bears went for 2 4th-and-1s and got stuffed on both of them, which turned into this very, very huge thing. That ended 2 of their first 4 drives, and they were both like pretty strung, like well strung together. Well, the first one was actually turned into a 4-and-out. They went for it in their own territory and gave the Vikings a free field goal. The second one came after this really terrible momentum disaster. The Vikings went for it on a 4th down of their own. Sam Darnold threw an interception, which was better than an incompletion. He just kind of threw it up because it wasn't there, and a Bear came down with it. Then the Vikings get off the field, but there is a running into the kicker penalty, so the Bears come back on the field. They drive all the way down. They get to a 3rd and 15, get 14 yards on it, and they're in very clear go-for-it range, obviously, right? Team with nothing to lose. Of course they're going to go for it. And Jerry Tillery absolutely smokes the rookie left tackle that the Bears ended up starting because Braxton Jones reported concussion symptoms over the weekend and ends up out for this game. So Jerry Tillery blows up the tackle. And it's not necessarily that that's the play. It's a hugely impactful moment, like statistically, right? And then the Vikings will get the ball and have a 2-minute drive. They kick a field goal, go to halftime, get the ball back, right? So it's not only that, but if you go back and watch that play, like pull it up on YouTube and watch Gerald Everett on that play. His eyes are not in the right place. Van Ginkel's coming off the edge completely unblocked. So I don't think he quite does his thing right now. Van Ginkel comes pretty deep and wouldn't have ended up having too much of an impact on the play. But a lot of the team still thinks that the play is going on because they didn't see DeAndre Swift's knee hit the ground and then he fumbles. Well, DeAndre Swift knows that his knee hit the ground, so he kind of lets the ball drop, and the ball's bouncing around. A couple players like chasing after it, and people are like kind of play. It's like whether they or not they heard a whistle, the crowd's going loud, and so they're just kind of finishing it out. Gerald Everett is off the field, like he is just walking off the field. He doesn't talk to anybody. He doesn't say. This is supposed to be one of the veteran leaders of the Bears. So when I talk about leading up to this week, trying to get the Bears to have quit in them, that was exactly the start you needed. Was 4-and-out, kick a field goal, and then the second they felt like they maybe had a little bit of momentum, you shut it right down. That's getting them to leave. And near the end of this game, Vikings up 27-12, you could really kind of feel which players were just sort of ready to go home. And the Vikings, of course, having all kinds of fun and calmly moving on. Short week now, West Coast. They've got their eyes set to Seattle, and I think they honestly had their eyes set to Seattle by about the fourth quarter, which makes sense because most of the starters had been pulled by then, at least on defense. Your Grenards and Byron Murphys and all those guys, Bynums, all those guys had baseball caps on for the last last couple of drives in this game. Another couple of things that I want to mention. Another kind of major moment comes in the fourth quarter. The Vikings are leading 20-6. And boy, isn't that just where the Vikings always kind of sputter out and then they give up a touchdown drive and suddenly it's a one-score game. Like that was always the way it went. But the Vikings drive all the way down and they'll score a touchdown on this one, aided by a complete idiot DPI on Tyreek Stevenson. But that's not what I want to talk about. It's a couple plays before that. The Vikings have a 3rd and 1. And again, isn't this exactly the MO of the Vikings, is to lose out on this 3rd and 1, punt the ball away, give up a touchdown the other way, and let him back in the game, right? And there's penetration. TJ Edwards shoots the gap. I think somebody was slow to come off of a double and gets to Cam Akers in the backfield. It's Akers in, not Aaron Jones on this drive. And Cam Akers finds a way to sidestep that, beat the ankle tackle, and dance across the line. It's a fairly ho-hum moment in the span of all kinds of other exciting things, touchdowns, the Randy Moss stuff. But to me, that's the moment where the Vikings sort of turned the page on who they could be. And the flow of these games where they always blow that 3rd and 1, right? The short yardage woes they've had all year. And then they always let them back in. Not these Vikings own the fourth quarter. These Vikings pull away and they would end up scoring again. It ended up 30-12. Those are the two moments. And if you want one other story of the game, the Vikings converted over the course of this game a 3rd and 17, by the way, on the same play that the Nick Mullins to Aaron Jones conversion that happened in the last Bears game. Exact same play to Aaron Jones. They also converted a 3rd and 10, a 3rd and 14, and a 3rd and 7. So 4 different times they converted what you would call 3rd and long, although 3rd and 7 is arguably media, but whatever, right? Like 4 of these 3rd and very much passing down tough conversions, and they got them. They got them a lot, and they got them on time, in rhythm. Sam Darnold, not his necessarily best day, but it felt like whatever hole the Vikings would dig themselves into with either penalties, 4 different ones on Cam Robinson today, or taking a bad sack or something, it always felt like they could dig themselves out of it. And they did in a lot of cases. But let me answer your questions about all of this stuff. So if you want to ask me questions anytime you want, you can send me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, or you can fill out the Google form, which is in the show notes to any episode. But the first question I am going to answer comes from Nick Dugan, who asks, do you like KOC's aggressive play calling and 4th down decisions as of late? Feels like we often don't know how to play with / sit on a lead. So that's kind of why I brought up what I just brought up, because they really did put the Bears away. And the last drive, it turned into a field goal drive because, they ran on 3rd and 6, which you would otherwise never do because of the clock. They are just trying to kill as much time as possible. But the run game really put them away. And it started out good. The run game kind of had a lull in the middle of the game, but in the beginning of the game, they were pushing the Bears around. And at the end of the game, they were pushing the Bears around. And at the end of the game, the Bears might have packed it in, but still, that's putting the game away. But what you might be talking about is that 4th and 3. So the Vikings have a 4th and 3, an easy field goal range, up 10-0. Most people would kick there. Analytics actually like to kick there, even though it just turns a 2-score game into a 2-score game. It was early, so that kind of logic doesn't really apply to the analytics models yet. They don't really care about that till it starts to get down to the wire. Otherwise, it's just take your points, basically. And a 4th and 3 was just a little bit too much, and Sam Darnold drops back, doesn't like what he sees, heaves it up, and it ends up intercepted, but batting it down would have been just as good. But I will say Kevin O'Connell leans more aggressive than I like, right? And I've said this quite a bit. I think we just came off the Zimmer era. That was the last head coach, and he was way more conservative than anybody liked. Maybe I'm just a conservative guy when it comes to play calling, because I never minded all of that too much, I think other than that fourth down, which I thought, that's probably a kick, I think I liked everything else he did. And I liked everything else the Bears did, to be honest. I think when they're backed into a corner like that, all those go for it's like you kind of have to. Just go show signs of life, man. Like, go prove something. I also thought they found a better balance. They started 16 series with a run on first down and 15 series with a pass on first down, right? Doesn't get much more balance than that. And I think that helped them get some more responsible yards, sustain longer drives. They had 3 different drives that were over 10 plays in this game, and contract the game when they had a big lead, instead of going, a 10-second 3 and out that gives the Bears every chance in the world to start to stage a comeback. So I liked that.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same place where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you cash that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The Falcons inspired no one in their 15-9 win over the Raiders.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast.
Very lackluster performance from the Atlanta Falcons. Very conservative performance from the Falcons. We'll talk about some positives about the defense and special teams. We'll talk about, this team's fleeting playoff hopes that did, they're still in it, but they did nothing, emotionally, spiritually, to make you believe that they should still be in it. But the story of this game was how conservative this coaching staff was in this game. They talked about it all night on the broadcast on ESPN. They played it super safe. They played not to lose. And we'll talk about the conservative play calling at the end of the game from Jimmy Lake, that after a very, very good performance from this defense for like 3.5 quarters, they decided they wanted to potentially hand the game to the Raiders. But we'll get into that later on today's episode. Let's talk about the offense. And we know that the Falcons have run a conservative offense over these last 4 games. They've been basically a run-pass offense these last 4 games, and they doubled down on that tonight in their 15-9 win over the Las Vegas Raiders, especially in the second half. Kirk, was okay in the first half. He got the monkey off his back, threw a 30-yard touchdown on a double move sluggo route to Drake London. And it was like, okay, Kirk, all right, we're doing something, second drive, okay, and we'll get this thing going. And it wasn't a great first half, but we'll get it to go in the second half, and that's where the offense can build off of that and build that momentum heading into this home stretch where we really need this offense to step up for this team to win down the stretch. And that all went out the window once Kirk Cousins dropped back to throw on the opening drive of the second half and threw a pick, trying to force it to Charlie Warner late with pressure in his face. Maybe the ball got tipped or whatever, but it's one of those things where right after that moment, the Falcons were like, well, we're not letting that happen again. And the play calling just shut down. And they were already conservative in the first half, just not like to an extreme degree. And they've been conservative for the last couple of weeks, just not to an extreme degree. But they decided to go to the extreme after that interception, right? And I looked it up. They called 3 pass plays the entire second half on first and second down, right? And one of those was the interception that Kirk threw. One of them was a screen pass. So they basically called 1 pass play the entire second half, and they ran the ball 20 times on first and second down, right? And so basically, if it wasn't third down, they were not letting Kirk throw the football. And again, that's not all on Kirk. The pass protection was not great, despite Max Crosby being out in this game. Drake London caught a couple passes, got open a couple of times. I don't even know if Darnell Mooney caught a pass in this game. It didn't feel like it. And they played a soft, conservative, not to lose game plan. And it was successful because they didn't lose, right? A win is a win, if you want to say that. And it wasn't that I went into this game thinking the Falcons were going to dominate this game. I didn't expect them to dominate this game. I didn't need them to dominate this game. I just wanted you to show me something inspirational on offense that would at least make me go, okay, there's a real shot that this team could potentially, run the table down this stretch, because they're going to need it going up against some of these teams later in the season. And if they just got like 20, 24 points tonight, like that would have been good enough for me. I don't need a great offense. I don't need a 30 burger or anything like that. 20 to 24 is good enough to beat this Raiders team, given where they're at this point in time. And they arguably could have had that in the first half if the offense had performed right. They had, we'll talk later about the positive field position, but, they were very reluctant to try long field goals. They had 2 opportunities to kick 56-yard field goals in this game with Young Wei Koo. They didn't attempt it. And then we got the same patented, Raheem Morris, let's go out there and try to draw them off sides and take the delay of game penalty. And it's like, all right, man, like I get it, but like, why are we doing this? I don't get it. I get it, but I don't get it, right? And it's just like, they, I don't know, man. It's just like, and it's not all on Kirk. Kirk's going to get all the blame because he's the quarterback and the offense isn't performing and the expectations are higher. I've been very critical of Zach Robinson on this podcast. I will continue to be very critical of Zach Robinson on this podcast. There's no defending Zach Robinson and what he was calling in this game. This is like, we can talk about a high school offense. I mean, we're talking about a high school offense from like 1996 is what this game plan was, right? This is the type of game plan that you have when you have a rookie quarterback, right? Which is why it's like, okay, well, if this is what your game plan is going to be, might as well have Michael Penix out there, right? This is not even a Michael Penix game plan. This is the game plan that the Falcons would have had if Nathan Peterman, the Falcons' 3rd-string quarterback on the practice squad, would have played this game. If they were forced to play Nathan Peterman, like, oh no, Nathan Peterman off of 3 days of practice, and Nathan Peterman's been around for 3 months. But the idea of like, if Nathan Peterman just got picked up this week and like doesn't know the offense, this is the offense that we would call, right? That's basically what this game plan was. And again, Kirk's going to get all the blame for it, and Kirk deserves tons of criticism. I'm not trying to sit here and say Kirk is blameless or anything like that. But like this is why I don't trust this coaching staff with Michael Penix. And everybody's just going to sit here and be, oh, well, you just put Michael Penix in, it's going to solve all these problems. And we did this, we've done this the last couple of years, guys, where it's like, oh, well, all the Falcons' problems are Marcus Mariota. That's the reason why the Falcons' offense wasn't very good in 2022. It's because Marcus Mariota's bad. And then, we gassed ourselves up and thought, oh, man, Desmond Ritter's going to, he just has to be okay and this offense can cook. And then when the offense wasn't okay and Desmond Ridder wasn't okay, we're like, well, Desmond Ritter's clearly the problem, right? And now we're going to do it again with Kirk Cousins, and we're just doing the same thing over and over again, sitting here being like, man, the only thing that we need to solve is we just got to get the right quarterback in here. And Michael Penix, you're up. You're next. And it's just like, why would I sit here and think any quarterback right now can perform with this type of performance on offense, this type of play call, this type of structure, this type of whatever, man. So that's where my frustration is, where it's just like, it doesn't matter who you put at quarterback. This type of offense just does not function in the National Football League, and this coaching staff has to figure it out. So we'll talk about that later in the episode. We'll talk about, the defense coming up, but let's get the Kirk Cousins chaos meter out of the way, as we do every week on these rapid reactions with the chaos meter, which is something we inherited from Locked On Vikings from Luke Braun. 5 levels of the chaos meter. There were 4 originally. I added the 5th one, right? And level 1 is conservative Kirk. Level 2 is, game manager Kirk. Level 3 is peak Kirk Cousins, because it's game manager plus a little bit of chaos. Level 4 is too much chaos. And then level 5 is it time for us to see Michael Penix? And we're at the point where it is a level 5. This is not a level 5 performance. This is a level 1 performance for Kirk Cousins. But in totality, with the performances these last couple of weeks, with the way that this offense is playing, we might as well turn the page to Michael Penix if this is what we're going to do, if this is what this offense is going to be. So the defense and special teams tonight was the MVU, the most valuable units, right? 12 of the Falcons' 15 points that they scored were arguably directly due to field position. They dominated the field position battle. They had 4 drives that started beyond the Falcons' 40-yard line. Right. And 2 of those drives they scored a touchdown and a field goal. So that's 10 of the points. And then they had another drive where they pinned the Raiders inside like the 5 and were able to get a safety. And so that was the other 12 points. So without field position, Falcons probably lose this game based off of how they performed on offense in this game, because the offense, basically had like 2, maybe 3 drives where they were effectively moving the football, but I don't think they reached the red zone the entire game. And again, maybe they would have gotten it on that first scoring drive because of they got a 30-yard play on that. And so, but it is one of those things where it's like, without defense and special teams, again, it's like the week 4 game that the Falcons won against the Saints, where the offense basically got shut out, but you got points from your defense, you got points from your special teams. We've seen the Falcons win that way. We'll take what we can get. And so we'll celebrate the defense and special teams, right? They were able to keep Brock Bowers in check. He did not have a big game in this one. They were able to get pressure on the quarterback and harass Desmond Ridder. His legs did hurt them a couple of times in this game, but it never got to the point where it was too much for this Falcons defense. The front really sort of controlled the line of scrimmage, and you saw multiple people eating. There was a D'Angelo Malone sighting in this game, guys. We got 2 sacks from D'Angelo Malone in this game. Really a sack and a half, but I'm sure the official stat sheets will call it a 2 sacks. With the second one, he split with Grady Jarrett. But, you saw Caden Ellis kicking butt. Zach Harrison, I think, officially got the safety, but Kentavious Street basically blew up that play, had a couple of tackles for loss. Arnold Ebiketie got a couple of pressures in this game. So you go down the list of the Falcons defensive front, and just like last week, they performed really well. The front has been killing it. And, unlike last week, the secondary did their job, right? They got a couple of turnovers. Both of them, I wouldn't say were, outstanding plays from the secondary, right? Justin Simmons' pick was basically a passing punt from Desmond Ridder, where he just kind of threw it up for no reason. And Justin Simmons was there to pick it up. And then Jesse Bates got an interception on the final play of the game on a Hail Mary, which gets us to, why was that an opportunity for the Raiders to win this game on a Hail Mary at the end of the game? They had 2 opportunities on Hail Marys at the end of the game. We're able to get within, I think, like 30 yards, clock it with 10 seconds left, heave up a ball to the end zone that went out the back of the end zone. And then, Jesse Bates was able to outmuscle some Raiders defenders or receivers for the interception on the final play with 2 seconds left. Thankfully, the tie did not go to the receiver on that one. Shout out to the officials who, bailed the Falcons out a couple of times in this game. They got a phantom roughing, a really tough roughing the passer penalty that really allowed them to bleed like another whole minute off the clock in the fourth quarter, which really helped them out. But the reason why the Raiders were able to march down the field was because the Falcons went back to their old tried and true Jimmy Lake special. That bend but don't break. We're going to play off coverage. We're going to rush 3. We're just going to let the Raiders matriculate the ball down the field. And they were successfully able to do that on those final 2 plays, final 2 drives, all because of the way that the Falcons were playing defense. They playing off coverage, rushing 3. And that's, we've talked about it all season long, where that bend but don't break defense is what they love to do. So again, it's good defensive performance for 3.5 quarters, and then they just decided to take their foot off the gas. And again, I get it. Like, you don't want the guys to get behind you. So I get the off coverage, but the rushing to 3, man, it's just like, especially at the end where it looked like they were dialing up a pressure. And then I think there was a timeout or something. And then they were like, no, we're just going to rush 3 again. And it was just like, what are we doing, man? What are we doing? So I was just sitting there waiting for the impossible to happen. And I refer to the impossible because if you checked out Atlanta Football Party on Locked On Sports Atlanta last week, Jarvis basically said it's impossible that the Raiders could, win this game. But he caveated it. We got to give Jarvis credit, because he basically said if Jimmy Lake calls the game like he's been calling it the last couple of weeks, which is a much more aggressive defense, which he did for 3.5 quarters, it is impossible for the Raiders to win the game. And he was right for 3.5 quarters. And then Jimmy Lake was like, you know what? I'm feeling that itch. Let's get back to that bend but don't break defense. And that's why, like, I sit here again, it's all going to be about Kirk Cousins, and I get it. But like, I just sit here being very disheartened by this coaching staff and the performance on both sides of the ball at the end. The defense played well, and then the coach decided he wanted to cost them the game. It wasn't the players on the defense, right, that cost them or anything like that. It was purely the play calling that cost them. And you had just some of the worst play calling I can recall seeing from an Atlanta Falcons team on both sides of the ball. This was one of the worst coached and called games that I have seen from the Atlanta Falcons in a long time. And I've seen some poor coaching games. I've seen some games where a team doesn't show up, right? And that's a different type of poor coaching. I've seen many of those games over the years with the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, that's basically been their MO for 25 years. Is like, there's going to be a couple of stinkers where they refuse to show up to the stadium.
They became the embarrassment of the NFL.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast.
It's reaching this point now where I'm just sick of it. And I know you are too. Like, we're all sick of this, right? It's one thing, okay, this season, you're going to lose some games sometimes and be frustrating, when you lose the Texans or the Colts early on or whatever. But it's like we had sort of built up some patience again with this franchise, right? After the end of last year with Matt Eberflus, where the team was starting to turn a corner, and then you had Caleb Williams, like there was a refresh here, a little bit of a refresh where you felt like, okay, new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, fresh direction. Like that built up some amount of benefit of the doubt, but more importantly, just like some patience to say, okay, we could handle early on some struggles with this team. And of course, like it helps when they bounce back and beat the Rams and then really stomp the Panthers and the Jaguars. And like we allowed ourselves to really buy back in and say, yes, they are on to something here. But then the Hail Mary loss to the Commanders, the last second loss to the Packers with the missed field goal or the blocked field goal, then the Vikings overtime disaster, the Lions fiasco that fires the head coach, and now back-to-back super embarrassing losses to the 49ers and Vikings. And we're just beaten down once again. Like we're back into the doldrums of where we existed in 2022 and in 2017 and in 2014. And I mean, 2005, I mean, all these different years, right? That we've all been through this over and over again. And it's such a stark reminder of not just how embarrassing this year's team is, but how embarrassing this franchise is. And when you have it on national television here, it really elevates the level of ineptitude that you see on this team. Because if you think about it, the Bears have lost now 8 straight games. They were 4-2. Now they're 4-10. It's hard to lose 8 straight games. You know what I mean? Even bad teams struggle to lose 8 straight games. The Jacksonville Jaguars have not lost 8 straight games right now. The Tennessee Titans have not lost 8 straight games. The Carolina Panthers have not lost 8 straight games. The two active longer losing streaks are now the Giants and the Raiders, and that's the company the Bears are keeping right now. 2 teams competing for the number 1 overall pick. The only 2 teams in the NFL with 2 wins this season are the only 2 teams with longer losing streaks than the Bears. And the Bears were not supposed to be here, right? The Raiders were supposed to be a bad team this year. We all saw that coming. The Giants, maybe they weren't supposed to be this bad, but we knew the Giants weren't going to be a great team this year. The Panthers, we knew, would be a bad team. The Patriots, we knew, would be a bad team. No one thought the Bears would be this bad. There was a debate on, okay, are they a team that wins 6 or 7 games? Or are they a team that wins 8 or 9 games? Or are they a team that maybe wins 10 games? But it was hovering around 500, not 4-10, and not a win left visibly on the schedule this year. That's what takes this to the next level. It's one thing to be a bad football team. Everybody knows the Raiders are bad. Everybody knows the Giants are bad. People didn't know the Bears were this bad, and that's what makes this that much more embarrassing. And then they find ways to just like sprinkle in new stuff that they find mistakes to make that you didn't realize they could make, or more just like never thought an NFL team would make. Because like, how do you get to the NFL in any role and make these kinds of mistakes? Like, for example, there was that play, the touchdown run by DeAndre Swift that was called back for a penalty for Doug Kramer forgetting to declare himself as an eligible player and not an offensive lineman on the play, and therefore bringing the play back. And like, that's such a football 101 that like every time you practice with Doug Kramer at fullback, every single practice rep, he should be practicing, hey, the signal is like, you sort of rub your jersey number and you say, okay, hey, I'm reporting as an eligible receiver. Every single rep at practice, he should be practicing before he gets on the field for that rep. He goes to the referees, or you make up a coach who's going to be the referee, right? He practices signaling to somebody that I'm checking in and I'm reporting myself as eligible. Like, and he said after the game, okay, it was getting to be late in the play clock and he rushed in and just kind of forgot about it. But like other teams don't consistently make those problems. Okay, you can point to the Lions had a play like that last year but I think that was a controversy where he claimed he made the signal, but the referees didn't see it. But like, you don't really get players just straight up forgetting to do that, especially on the goal line on a touchdown scoring play. It's one thing if it happens on 1st and 10 at the 50. It's another thing when it's a play that takes points off of the board. Or you have Jalen Johnson, who this is not Jalen Johnson's fault, but this is the example here. Did you notice Jalen Johnson's jersey in this game? He played the entire game without the captain C sewn on his jersey. Every team captain gets a C sewn on their jersey. He has had a C sewn on his jersey every game this season except for this one. And it wasn't as though the Bears took away his captainship. Thomas Brown even confirmed after the game, no, it wasn't a punishment thing. Somebody messed up. And Jalen Johnson was asked about it after the game and said he was unaware. He didn't even realize that he played the game without a captain C on his jersey. And so he was going to go to the equipment manager for explanation. But like only the Bears, right? Only the Bears have this kind of just like little sloppy attention to detail BS that it reeks throughout the entirety of the franchise, right? This isn't just like, oh, it's embarrassing because your coach forgets to call timeout at the end of the game. That's one thing. They fired the head coach. They got him out of there. But then you're not coaching your offensive lineman to report as eligible. Your equipment staff is getting things wrong. Your staff that helps you challenge plays gets there. I mean, it's not just the players. It's not just the coaches. It's like organizational stink that burns the hairs out of your nose every time you smell this team on Sundays, or in this case, on Mondays. And it's like, man, at some point, where is enough with this team? I mean, it's breaking us, and it seems to be breaking Caleb Williams a little bit. And I want to talk about that more this week. If we're at risk of really truly breaking this quarterback and needing the next coach to fix him, or if there's some room to sort of still right the ship a little bit here as the season goes on. At least Caleb himself, he's holding on and he's fighting through to the end of these games, and still, I mean, in the fourth quarter, making some impressive throws. He keeps having moments of reminding us what he is capable of, but like, it does seem to be a growing concern there as the offense continues to struggle. And it's not just the quarterback, it's the offensive line, it's your new left tackle, it's receivers, it's everybody.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Not only did the Raiders lose on Monday Night Football to the Atlanta Falcons, but the one thing that they couldn't do, they did.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast.
What the Raiders could not have happen on national TV on Monday Night Football, that inevitably did happen, and that's put out an embarrassing performance. You just couldn't do that. Oh, that was something I was concerned about the week before, week 14, when they played Tampa Bay and they got down 14-0. I thought, whoa, boy, here goes the really bad embarrassment. You know, the blowout special on TV, the one that just looks like the guys have checked out, they're not ready to play. And to their credit, they battled back. And even though the game was not a blowout, again, 15-9, the Raiders still had an opportunity to win the game in the end. The style in which they were playing, the way that it looked, the fact that the building had no juice, the fact that the press box wasn't really amped up. I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm always fired up to be at a game. I'm always fired to be blessed to be in the situation where I could be in Allegiant Stadium watching a game and calling that my job. But I'll tell you right now, as I was sitting there, I kept thinking, like, what is going on with this team? What is going on with this game? It just did not feel like there was any sense of urgency. It didn't still feel like there was any sense of purpose. It just felt like it was the end of the road. I mean, think about this. 3 kicks blocked, right? 3 kicks were blocked, 2 punts and an extra point in a game, right? That's one of the massive just mistakes and problems that happen for the Raiders on Monday Night Football. Twice, Amir Abdullah, who's a 10-year-plus vet in the league, fielded a punt inside his 10 and one inside the 5. And the one inside the 5 resulted in a safety on 2 bad runs up the gut. And on one of them, it got Sincere McCormick hurt, right? And that's he got stuffed, and that's when he hurt his ankle, went into the locker room and never came back out, was ruled out. But, that's a 10-year vet, 10-year-plus vet, fielding a punt inside the 5, inside the 3. Like, you just don't do that, right? They always say, put your heels on the 10-yard line. If it sails over your head, you let it bounce and you hope it goes into the end zone. And if they down it at the 3 or 4 or whatever, they made a good play. So be it. And that actually happened later on in the game when Jack Jones was back there receiving a punt. That he let the ball drop as he should, and it rolled, and there you go. You end up down in the ball like the 3 or the 4-yard line. But you have to have a certain area where you're going to go, right? The ball's about to come over your head. You fake like you're about to catch it, fair catch it. It goes over your head, and then you hope that it rolls into the end zone. But to field it the way that they did and then ultimately get a safety, that just kind of told you all you need to know about the state of the game. Offensive play calling, it looked very suspect again. This is the first week when I could tell you Scott Turner's play calling was bad, and especially with Desmond Ridder getting the start. And I realized that he only had a handful of games or a handful of days to prepare for this game for Desmond Ridder, but it just didn't look good. And it just, to me, it felt like as I'm sitting in the press box watching the game that this was, the first game since the reports came out that Bill Belichick is, interested in Scott Turner as a potential offensive coordinator there at North Carolina with them. And it almost felt like, Scott Turner said, oh, well, I'm out of here. I'm going to go be with Bill in Chapel Hill. It almost felt like that. Did not feel like Scott Turner was locked in. The play calling, again, when you have a quarterback in Desmond Ridder getting his first start with the team and you're not feeding Brock Bowers and Big Mike your security blankets, there's a problem. If you're a quarterback trying to prove that you could be the guy, you should be looking for Brock Bowers. You should be looking for Big Mike. You should be looking for guys that are your go-tos, again, your security blankets. And it just didn't happen. Bowers, 6 targets, 3 catches. Mayer, 2 targets, 1 catch. That's not enough. That's not enough. And for a guy in Desmond Ridder who threw the ball almost 40 times, that's how you distributed the ball to your tight ends, a total of 8 targets. It's not going to get it done. Bowers alone should have had 8 targets, if not 8 catches. And that's not just because I want him to go and set the record and get a bunch of targets. He's your best player. He's your best player, and it looked like there was no rhyme or reason or want to get him the rock like they should have. The team had no energy. Allegiant had no energy. The fact that Falcons are a bad team and the Raiders were still in it in the end, that's on them. But it's still, I mean, when the fans got loud, they got loud, but you could just tell that it was one of those, yeah, I know it's 3rd and long, I got to get loud. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a crowd that was really into it. Sometimes I can sit in the press box and the juice of the crowd gets you so fired up that you're ready to go. And I didn't feel that. At any time in the game, I was sitting there next to Ryan Hogue, former Raiders wide receiver, drafted in 2003, Mr. Irrelevant. He comes on my radio show twice a week. He did the pregame show with me leading into the game. And we were sitting there, and he said, Q, is this the first time in a long time that you haven't been like fired up for a Raider game? And I said, yeah, it feels like the season was over. For the first time this season, it felt like the end. And I know that there's still 3 more games left, but it literally felt like the end as I was sitting there. It felt like the inevitable that they were going to go into the locker room and clean out their lockers after the game. That's what it literally looked like. They looked lifeless. AP looked like he was over it. Every time I saw the camera flash to him, as we have TV monitors in the press box as well, looked like he was over it. MD, when you saw Mark Davis in his box, looked like he was over it. Again, it just felt like the end of the road was there. It's like when a relationship is done and you're just like, okay, we're going to break up and go our separate ways and we're going to be better for it. That's what it just felt like the breakup was coming, right? It just felt like everyone was okay with that and comfortable. It's almost like my school career when I knew that, I knew I wasn't going to pass that class. I knew I wasn't doing very good. I knew that there was really nothing I could do at that stage of the game to get my grade where it needed to be. So I just said, all right, I'll just chalk it up. I know what it is. Mama Q knows what it is. Pops knows what it is. Not very good student, right? And so I'm just going to have to chalk that up to an L, and I guess I'm going to be grounded a little bit longer, right? I mean, it was one of those things. When you know that there's nothing that you can do to fix anything, it's just like, well, all right, now what? It really felt like that. That was the one thing that couldn't happen. And, talking to different people in the press box, I said, this is the first time I felt this all season. And we've had plenty of conversations on this show, on my radio show, sitting around a bar, whatever the case may be. Is AP coming back? Is he not coming back? I had that conversation at the Torch many times on Monday before the game. And, I've continued to say, I hope he does. I think he could be a really good coach. But what couldn't happen for him in his efforts to keep his job was what we saw on Monday Night Football. The team just looked like they were over it. And that does not bode well for him. Now, do I think that Mark Davis is going to just sit there and say, all right, well, we're going to move on from you now and let the last 3 games of the season go with someone else as the interim head coach? I doubt that. I really do. I mean, we'll talk to AP. We're scheduled to talk to him at 11 o'clock this morning by way of Zoom. So I'm assuming that that's going to go off without a hitch and be no problem. I don't see MD making that move because at one point, does it matter at this stage, right? They're 2-12. They're riding a 10-game losing streak. I keep saying winning streak because I think in my mind I want them to be winning so bad. But they're not, obviously. It just felt like this was almost the nail in the coffin. And like I said, as much as I have said that I would like to see AP come back, I know that he's had a lot of things stacked against him this season. What he couldn't do was have that team look flat. What he couldn't do is have that team look unprepared. What he couldn't do is let his special teams unit let him down multiple times by way of kick return and kick blocks, right? I mean, there was a time, as Daniel Carlson told us in the locker room, on the extra point attempt, there was only 10 guys on the field. That's not okay. That's on coaching, right? I mean, look, I didn't play football very long, but I played it long enough to know that when it was time for the special teams unit, all right, it's third down. All right. Punt coverage, punt team, get lined up. Everyone get lined up, right? Somebody does that. Somebody's supposed to make that call, whether that's a coach, whether that's the snapper, the holder, whatever the case may be. Like on a field goal, the holder's supposed to count, but they had 10 guys on. They had 10 guys on the field. They get an extra point block. Then they have, 2 punts are blocked. Like that just can't happen. They have kick returns come back, 30-plus yards on kick returns. Like it just didn't look inspiring at all. Right? They run the ball up the gut from the goal line, gets a safety. I mean, just everything that could go wrong went wrong for the Silver and Black, and it just was very, uninspiring. And the fact that the Falcons allowed them to hang around told you a lot more about them than it even told you about the Raiders. If they sneak into the playoffs, they're one and done because they are not very good. They being the Atlanta Falcons, but the Raiders and Antonio Pierce in particular couldn't have that performance put on wax like my guy Emmett Golden from ESPN Cleveland likes to say. Put it on wax. Well, that's what AP didn't want on wax. Is that what we saw on Monday night? So that inevitably, if his fate wasn't already sealed, that probably sealed the deal for him. And I hate to say that. I don't champion for anyone to lose their job. I'm not that guy. I've been very supportive of AP. But I think when the evaluation season, as this has been for now, 2 months, continues to roll on, and Mark Davis sits down, and again, on national TV, you get embarrassed by that lackluster performance. I had people texting me during the game saying, man, this is setting football back 50 years. People I really respect in the industry, right? Sports media telling me this game is setting the NFL back 50 years. This is how bad this is. That's an embarrassment on national football. That's on national TV, that's an embarrassment. You can't have that. Again, not pounding the table for AP, not trying to all of a sudden turn on him. I just know that what he couldn't have happened on Monday Night Football. We'll find out what the end result is. But to me, again, just feeling the vibe in the building, feeling the vibe in the locker room following the game, it felt like that game, Week 15, was a nail in the coffin for Antonio Pierce and a lot of this Raiders team in 2024.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same place where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you cash that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Penn State quarterback Drew Allar announced that he is returning for his senior season in 2025.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Drew Allar coming back only matters as long as Penn State is going to build around him, because Drew Allar's not Superman. It is a big deal that Penn State is getting a quarterback returning for his third season of starting action, 4 years. Veteran experience matters in this case. Also, Andy Kotelnicki's back, so Drew Allar doesn't have to go through a third different coordinator, right? You had Mike Yurcich, Andy Kotelnicki, what would have been hypothetically a third different coordinator, and that's just Penn State a hire in-house, but now that's all taken care of. Andy Kotelnicki is back. So for Drew Allar to return, it is a big deal for Penn State, but it's only going to work. This is all only going to matter if they build around him. Through the portal, it has to be that way. You can fix things through the portal, because I look at it this way. Tyler Warren is leaving. It's still up in the air if Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen are going to come back. I know Julian Fleming didn't give Penn State a lot of statistical upside, but you're losing one of the smartest minds in the locker room right now from the player's standpoint on the roster. So Drew Allar, Trey Wallace, and Amari Evans, they're talented, they're good, they're going to start on this team in 2025, but that is not enough. When you could, at the end of the day, lose your three other biggest playmakers, which are Tyler Warren, Nicholas Singleton, and Katron Allen. Now, some of those boxes are checked off if Singleton decides to return. If you can get Allen back as well. If you get both of them back. But I don't know that that's likely. It's certainly possible, but it's not necessarily likely. So how does Penn State do this? They have to go through the transfer portal. How do you replace Tyler Warren's production? I think of Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds and eventually Andrew Rapplier when he works his way back. But those guys aren't going to replicate Heisman-like production. That's what I'm trying to get at, is that this is Heisman-like production that you have to replicate somehow, some way. Trey Wallace can give you a solid option at the wide receiver spot, but the collection of them is Wallace, Evans, Reynolds, and Dinkins. Are those four enough to give Drew Allar the supporting cast that he needs to make this offense and take it to a next level? I think the chemistry between Allar and Kotelnicki is a step in the right direction, but that's why adding an elite wide receiver through the portal is so important here. You do have the spring football transfer portal window. There is a chance that Penn State doesn't have to necessarily land a playmaker now, but in the scheme of things, you want them through the winter transfer portal window and not wait. You want to get them acclimated and adjusted to the system, learning the playbook now, because Andy Kotelnicki's playbook is complicated. It is complicated, and we saw what happens with Adante Cephas, for example. This isn't obvious. This is an exception, not the standard. But in the case of Dante Cephas, the reason he struggled at Penn State, for the most part, was because he was not adapting to the playbook. So that's why it is important to get playmakers now, building chemistry, but also learning the playbook for that following 2025 season. But veteran experience above all else. You get QB1. Allar will be in the Heisman conversation solely because of what he's done. He's progressively gotten better, and Andy Kotelnicki has tapped into that next level of his game. Allar wouldn't be in this particular spot without Kotelnicki. I mean, also because of Allar. Allar's the one throwing the football, playing the games, but Kotelnicki, that combination has helped Drew Allar take that next step. Let's answer why he's coming back. And of course, I will get to your comments as well. We got multiple segments to talk about all this. Take your questions. We can even talk about Bo Prabula again too. But why did Allar come back? Because now people are catching on to what I've been saying, what other Penn State reporters have been saying, that Drew Allar is an NFL quarterback and not just, oh, well, he's a 5th or 6th round development. No, let's stop with that. The people that are saying that are just trying, they are being that way on purpose, because I don't know how you can logically come to this conclusion anymore that Drew Allar is not a legitimate quarterback prospect in the NFL. Mel Kiper and other draft analysts are starting to put him as the 3rd or 4th best quarterback prospect. So anybody that is saying that Drew Allar is not a capable quarterback is doing it on purpose, or they just do not legitimately watch or care about college football. So ignore them. So why is he coming back if he's the top 5 quarterback in next year's draft? That's good. That is good enough to get you taken in the first round. Well, it's not good enough to get you taken first overall. Now you could take the risk, take the gamble if you're Drew Allar. Drew Allar said it was a football decision. Allar said this was a football decision, and it is. To come back to Penn State, you now have the opportunity, and NIL helps with this. If we were not in the NIL era, Drew Allar would be going off to the NFL because instead of making no money, you are now making X amount of millions of dollars. But my point being is that instead of being potentially someone who's taken at the end of the first round, when you still have that year of eligibility to develop and get better and actually be the first overall pick, why Drew Allar returns is because he now has an opportunity to play his way into being the first overall pick while making some NIL money on the side. So when you go into the draft and every selection gets an allotted dollar amount, and if you go 30th and maybe the second round, say Drew Allar doesn't have a perfect combine or a pro day, enough for the scouts to say, you know what, this kid is a top 10, top 5 quarterback now. I think he is. I think the potential is there enough to take Allar with the top 10 selection. But here's the big difference. There is a big difference between getting a $10 million contract over 4 years if you're taken with one of the top, if you're taken 30 through 40th. That's including, so first and second round, around picks 30 through 40. You're getting about $10 to $12 million, right? Roughly, give or take. But it's when you are the first overall pick, the second overall pick, where that is life-changing money as a rookie, where you get $10 million per season, not just for a 4-year contract. You are getting $10 million, and it might be more than that if you are the first overall pick, but in that range per season, you're getting about 40 to 45 million. So Drew Allar is banking on the fact that if he returns for his senior season with Andy Kotelnicki and trusting that James Franklin and Penn State's NIL will be competitive enough to go get those playmakers that he needs, or to be able to retain Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen and find somebody that can at least help replicate what Tyler Warren gave you in that reliable option. That all of this will come together. Penn State will be a national title contender again in 2025, and they're laying the foundation for that. They are laying the foundation for that. But that's why Allar's coming back. Because instead of being, well, you're guaranteed to maybe get into the first round, maybe want to be one of the first selections on day 2, okay, that gets you some money, but Drew's going to be able to offset that with NIL. The difference is now he can play his way into being the first overall pick in the 2026 NFL draft. For what it's worth, I spoke to a Chicago Bears scout in passing, and I said this on another show, that, hey, I know you already have QB1. You have Caleb Williams, but what are your thoughts on Drew Allar? Just because I would have asked any other scout if I had, but I happened to bump into the Bears scout. And he says, I like what I saw from Allar, but he's a young quarterback. It would benefit him to come back for another season and play some more college football. Experience matters. Allar understands that. It is better for Allar to come back to Penn State. This was the right decision for him. Unfortunately, it ruins what Bo Pribula was trying to do with his college football career, and ruin hindsight. If he lands on his feet somewhere in another Power 4 school and starts for 2 years and has a great end to his college football career, then maybe it doesn't ruin things, but it ruins what he had set up at Penn State.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
I hope you're not tired of HBCUs hiring ex-NFL players as head coaches, because it seems like Michael Vick is next in line.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Michael Vick is interviewing. He is in discussions. He's in talks to be the newest Norfolk State head coach. And quite frankly, I think that this is going to get done. I want to timestamp this because over the course of Monday afternoon, Monday evening-ish, this has been a very rapidly moving statement and story, right? Because you had Norfolk State at play. And that was the big one at first. And then Sacramento State came into play. And then apparently Sacramento State wasn't in play. Before we get into the tug of war and bidding war, I want to set the stage. It is currently Monday, December 16th, 6:25 Central Time, as I am recording this. By the time you hear this on Tuesday morning, because I'm going to set this up to drop, and I may not be awake when it drops, Michael Vick may be the head coach. That very well may be the case. That being said, I want to take a look at the idea of Michael Vick as the Norfolk State head coach, because I know that there is a strong opinion about whether or not ex-NFL athletes with no real coaching experience should be able to come to the HBCU level. I understand that this is kind of like it's treated like a proving ground in some people's minds. I don't necessarily know that that's the truth. How do I want to phrase this? Because first off, I want to apologize to you if you are frustrated, because this is going to be a regular occurrence. My thing about the frustration is it's all based on how one person left, not even what that person did while they were here. I think that the thing with Deion Sanders is the media firestorm that comes with them, and not the actual output on the field, not the actual those things, right? But if you look at the whole ex-NFL athlete to HBCU head coach, the pipeline been pretty kind. Deion Sanders, back-to-back SWAC championships, Celebration Bowl berths. You're looking at Eddie George, just took his team to the FCS playoffs. Eddie Robinson, I know it hasn't resulted in any playoffs or championships, but I would think he's still doing a solid job. And I think that would be a little bit less of a debate if his quarterback situation was better this year due to health. But we're not here to go into each one of those guys. Maybe we will have that conversation. But outside of those three, I don't think anybody else really fits the mold. Hugh Jackson will be the closest one, but he came in with loads of coaching experience. And I think that's another, honestly, I think that's another misconception about the Deion Sanders thing, is that he came in with no expectations or no history, no resume, no experience. That's not true. That just is not true. And I think the important part about mentioning that is that Michael Vick has a lot of similarities to Deion Sanders. He's going to come with a media firestorm. For all intents and purposes, Eddie George has been really low-key. Eddie Robinson is at his alma mater. Like it's different. It almost felt foul to even put Eddie Robinson in that category, but he does fall in the NFL to HBCU coach pipeline, even though he is an HBCU guy. So it's completely separate. It's completely separate than George and Sanders. But in this situation, there's a personality. There's a notoriety that comes with Michael Vick. The same way Deion Sanders is Deion Sanders, Michael Vick is Madden 04. The same way Deion Sanders is one of the most known NFL players of all time that stretches generations. These are kids who didn't even get to watch him play. They want to come play for Prime. I think you can have a very similar effect if you're talking about Michael Vick, because he's literally Madden 04. He's the video game. And these guys know that. Even if they weren't around to play that game, they know Michael Vick, the most dynamic quarterback of his time. They know Michael Vick. And I think Michael Vick can pull a lot of people in. So the similarities of Deion Sanders are, in my opinion, way more applicable than looking at Eddie George. But they have the one similarity, and that's that neither one of them had any head coaching experience. My thing about being upset about NFL players is Eddie George was as great as Deion Sanders' exit was crash and burn. That's my personal opinion. If we're talking about a level of professionalism, a level of respect that you want to see towards HBCUs, I don't like that Deion Sanders' exit is treated with so much more weight than Eddie George's tenure. That's not fair, but people want to focus on the negative. And that's the way that I see this, okay? The thing about the Deion Sanders, Eddie George, I'll even throw Eddie Robinson. I'll take Eddie Robinson out, honestly. The thing about that is that it's been successful. Why would you not want to do it? Do you feel like he's going to walk off? If you're Michael Vick, do you feel like Michael Vick's going to take Norfolk State for a 3-year run and then dip? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with understanding that he is a player, a former player who may have the dreams of coaching on a higher level? Are you all right with that? I don't think some people are. I think some people are uncomfortable with that idea because it makes them look like a platform, makes them look like a trampoline. And I don't necessarily think that's accurate. I think that's all framing and how you want to look at it. I don't look at it that way at all. I genuinely don't. But anyway, why would Vic to Norfolk State make sense? Because you had the connection between Eddie Robinson and his alma mater, Eddie George in the city of Nashville. There wasn't any connection with Deion. There wasn't any connection there. Well, now you have another connection with this being Vic's hometown. And Vic is a Virginia man. And it seems like from the reports that he wants to give back to a community that is close to him, and that's the state of Virginia. And he talked about, hey, I don't know how to whatever, but I know how to lead. And they're going to build up a staff around him. He's going to make sure that he's supported. And I can get down with that. I think that there's a lot of interest from both parties involved. Now to the Sacramento State part. They got $50 million. This was a report by Adam Schefter that they have $50 million in NIL. And they're looking to move up to the FBS. I'm just going to be honest with y'all. That's a hard one. If we get into a bidding war with Norfolk State and Sacramento State and a $50 million NIL fund, forget about it. But then Sacramento State came out and said, no, this is not real. Fake. This is not real. So I don't know what the heck is going on. I don't. But I'll say this. If Norfolk State is running unopposed, it's going to happen. Everybody seems into it. Everybody seems interested. It's going to happen.